Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a good beginning to your week. So this week's Torah portion is Parshat Beshalach. Pharaoh, at the end of last week's portion, he breaks and he decides to allow the Jewish people to leave. The death of the firstborn. He's a firstborn himself. He's terrified, and Pharaoh lets the Jewish people leave. And this week's Torah portion says, "Vayehi Beshalach Paro et ha'am," when Pharaoh let the Jewish people go. And then the Jewish people had already ran away a few days. And the verse says like this. Pharaoh says to the Jewish people, Nevuchim heim ba'aretz sagar aleim hamidbar. Oh, they got stuck in the swamp of the desert and they lost their way. And the question is, Pharaoh had sent the Jewish people away earlier. So who's he speaking to? What does it mean Pharaoh says to the Jewish people? How can he be speaking to the Jewish people if they're not there anymore? And the simple commentary that Rashi tells us is very simple. Pharaoh wasn't speaking to the Jewish people. He was speaking about them. He's getting ready to chase them. He's so angry, so much hate. After all the 10 plagues, he lets them leave and immediately he wants to chase them again. But he needs to explain why. So he tells his people, oh, look at the Jewish people. They left. You think it was easy? Sagar aleim hamidbar, they're stuck in the desert. So he wasn't speaking to the Jewish people, but about them. But Targum Yonatan Uziel, one of the greatest sages, says, no. He was actually speaking to the Jewish people. Well, how could he be speaking to the Jewish people? Very simple, he says. There were 2 Jews who stayed back and refused to leave. They wanted to stay with Pharaoh. And their names were Dasan and Aviram. And Pharaoh was speaking to them. He was trying to, a typical tyrant. He was trying to placate them and tell them, you made a good decision by staying with me, the tyrant, because look at the Jewish people. They're stuck in the desert. They made a big mistake. Now, who are Dasan and Aviram that chose to stay in Egypt over going out at the Exodus? So we find 4 instances about them in the Torah. The first one is the first day when Moses comes out and he sees one Jew hitting another Jew and he says, wicked Jew, why are you hitting another Jew? Russia, why are you hitting someone? The guy says, oh, you're going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? That's the first time we read about them. The second time we read about them is when the Jews get the manna and God says the manna should be for one day, don't leave over for the next day. Who leaves over for the next day? Dasan and Aviram. And it turns into worms. The third time we read about them is the story of the spies. When the spies came back and the Jewish people decided they don't want to go to Egypt, it says they went around in the community and they said, listen, let's get a new leader and let's go back to Egypt. And the fourth time, of course, is in the story of Dasan and Aviram, of Korach. When Korach rebels against his cousin, it says Dasan and Aviram were his right-hand men. And in fact, Moses called them to come speak to them. And they said, we don't want to talk to you, Moses. It's enough he took us out of Egypt to kill us here. We have no interest in talking to you. A simple question becomes like this. If Dasan and Aviram were such evil people, the 4 stories we know about them are of constantly rebelling and complaining and non-belief in God. How did they get saved? Didn't they stay with Pharaoh in Egypt? How did they end up in the desert by the manna, by the spies, by Korach? How did they end up there? And the rabbis tell us something fascinating. That Dasan and Aviram tagged along with Pharaoh when he went to chase and fight the Jewish people. And while the Pharaoh and all his soldiers and everyone was drowned, Dasan and Aviram were saved. And they ended up staying in the desert with the Jews. But why were Dasan and Aviram saved? If they were so bad, if they were so wicked, if they had such little faith, if they were atheists, why were they saved? And the remarkable story is like this. Because back in the beginning of the slavery, when Moses came to the Jewish people, Pharaoh did something so devious. He had the Jewish people do certain quotas. And if they didn't do their quota, they would get beaten by the Jewish police. He put Jewish police on top of them, who would have to watch the Jews and make sure they do their quota. And if they didn't do it, they would get beaten. And if the Jewish police didn't beat their own fellow Jews, the Egyptian police would beat them. And the Torah tells us that the Jewish police refused to beat the Jews, and they got beaten in that stead. And that's when they came to Moses, and they said, Moses, what did you do? You said you're saving us, and look how bad it got. Who were these Jewish police who got beaten for not beating their brethren? They were Dasan and Aviram. And basically the story is like this, that Dasan and Aviram, although them being so wicked and vicious against God, because they loved their fellow brethren, and because they stood up for them, and because they took lashes and whipping for them, they were saved and they merited to be saved. What does it tell us about the power of love for another fellow, about the power of standing up for another? You know, years ago, yesterday we celebrated the passing of the previous Rebbe, and today the Rebbe took on the leadership. And what embodied the Rebbe's leadership more than anything was his love for a fellow. And back in the 70s, there was this religious leader from Harnof community in Israel who came to visit the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was imploring on him to get involved with the secular Jews, to get involved with those Jews who were not so close to the Judaism, and to inspire them. And he was sort of hesitant. He said, listen, I have enough of my own community. What do you want from me? And the Rebbe really wanted to implore on him. And then the Rebbe looked at him, and the Rebbe said, I have a question for you. What's the most important organ in our body after our brain? And the guy says, the heart. And the Rebbe says, where is the heart? And he shows the heart is on the left side. The Rebbe says, what's the most important in Judaism, right or left? He says, of course, right. We know Judaism, right brings closer, right shows kindness, right shows love. Of course it's the right, not the left. So the Rebbe says to him, if that's the case, if the right is the most important in Judaism and the heart is the most important, why isn't the heart on your right side? Why is the heart on your left side? And he listened. And he thought, and obviously he realized that Rebbe wanted to answer him. So he waits, and the Rebbe says, I'll tell you why. Because the heart is really on your right side. Because you know why your heart is there? Your heart is there for the fellows facing you, to be empathetic to them, to be caring to her, to be loving to them, to nurture, to show compassion. Your heart is really there for someone else, for empathy and love and kindness and sharing and caring to the person that's facing you. And therefore, technically, although your heart is on your left side, it's really on the right side, because it's on the right side of the person that you're seeing facing you. And that's where it really has to be to show empathy and care and love for the person facing you. And that's really one of the most important values and teachings that the Rebbe taught us. The Rebbe taught us to love, to show compassion, to listen and to see the person facing you who needs your care and who needs your attentiveness, who needs your understanding, who needs your patience. And that's why Dasan and Aviram, although being so wicked, so rebellious, staying in Egypt and not wanting to go out, yet when Pharaoh and all of them are drowned, they're saved for one reason. Because they took the beating to protect the Jewish people who were enslaved. And that was valuable enough. We need a lot of empathy now, and love and care, more than we ever did as a nation, as a Jewish people, as a community. Show someone some love. Always remember why your heart is on your left side and on the person facing to your right side. Shavua Tov, have a great week. God bless you.